Hey, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who plays bluegrass. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bluegrass Jam Along. I've got an extra interview for you this time, and how this one came about is I recently did a couple of episodes for Doc Watson's 100th birthday, and if you haven't heard those, go and check them out because there's some incredible people in there. There's Bryan Sutton, Tim O'Brien, there's T. Michael Coleman, there's Jack Lawrence, there's just like a great list of people, and one of them was John McEuen from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and we chatted about him working with Doc on the Will the Circle Be Unbroken record, which is a really cool chat, really interesting, so go and listen to those episodes. But there was some stuff that I chatted to John about that's a bit more about his career and aspects of Will the Circle that weren't really Doc related. And I was so kind of in need of editing that stuff down to fit everything in. Those two episodes ended up at nearly 5 hours as it was. But I really enjoyed this chat with John. And there's so much more stuff in there that I didn't want to just leave sat on a hard drive somewhere. So I chatted to John and said, look, would it okay if I put this out as an episode on its own? And he very kindly said yes. So I've re-edited it and put a load of stuff back in. And I've got what I think is a really interesting chat with John about recording the Circle album, who they worked with, how it all came together, how it's been received over the years, and some of the stuff that he's done since as well, because that was 50 years ago, and John's obviously had a long musical career since then. So, yeah, just a really cool chat with John McEuen, former member of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. I really hope you enjoy it. Here we go. I mean, from what I've read, my understanding is that it was you that sort of brought the bluegrass influence to the band, really, in the first place. The bluegrass element of the Dirt Band came from you.
Folk music came from Jeff. Bluegrass came from me and Les in our beginning way. I was 20, Les was 16. And the bluesy side came from Jimmy Fadden, and kind of a rock attitude from Jimmy Ibbotson, who was from Philadelphia, so I couldn't blame him for having that attitude. Had several attitudes. And I would say that Les and I had the most bluegrass influence, yes, since he was mandolin and I was banjo, and the other guys were just strumming away. And I didn't know it, but you familiar with his album, Uncle Charlie and His Dog Teddy?
Yeah.
Well, that had two bluegrass tunes on it. Les wanted to do Clinch Mountain Backstep. I did too, but I wanted to do Randy Lynn Rag. And I didn't know at the time that Doc Watson was from the Clinch Mountain area. But he heard this album. Merle Watson played it for him, his son. And I didn't know Earl Scruggs would ever hear this, I hoped. Randy Lynn Rag was named after his son, Randy Lynn. And Gary Scruggs told me he heard Bojangles and I had to get it. Had to go buy a copy. And he went to the store, they were sold out, so he bought the album. He listened to the record, Bojangles. Oh, good, it's the one. He took it home. His dad listened to, that's nice. That Bojangles song is nice. And then he played some of Shelley's Blues. Then he played Randy Lynn Rag. And, well, Earl said, let's go meet that boy that played Randy Lynn Rag the way I intend to. And a month later, they came to our first Nashville show. That led to the friendship that 6 months later, I asked Earl Scruggs in Colorado, taking him back to a hotel after every night for 5 nights. Earl, would you maybe record with the Nitty Gritty? And he goes, I'd be proud to. Now the next week, Doc Watson, I called my brother and said, Earl said yes. And then Doc Watson was there the next week, and I asked him. I was a little braver, although I never met Doc. Mr. Watson, would you like to make a record with us and Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and Earl Scruggs? It was kind of, if Earl's going to be there, I want to pick. And I had admired Doc ever since that Newport folk music album. You know, he was playing Doc's guitar, burning up Doc's guitar. He's in the middle of it, he says, "The sun's hot, ain't it?" or something like that. And Deep River Blues and stuff. And I'd admired Earl for forever. And on Monday, my brother said, "I'm going to get Merle Travis." And he called Merle Travis. And anyway, that's how we got Doc. And then the album, 3 weeks into that process, is when we told the other guys in the Dirt Band, we're going to go to Nashville and make a bluegrass album. I didn't want to. Bill and I, my brother and I, decided not to tell the guys right off because Jeff had a nickname, Dr. No. And, and I said, we don't want Dr. No getting upset. So when we could come to Jeff and say, "Jeff, we're going to record with Earl Scruggs, Doc Watson, Merle Travis," and by then Bill and I got Earl to ask Maybelle Carter, and she said yes. I was a huge Maybelle fan, and well, she lived in the Clinch Mountains too, so Clinch Mountain backstep was a good thing to record. How did that happen? I don't know, but then we asked him. Oh, we had Jimmy Martin too, and one of the guys goes, "Who's Jimmy Martin?" Well, you'll find out. Jimmy Martin, the man that thought everyone has a right to his opinion. "Hi, I'm Jimmy Martin, world's best bluegrass singer." "Oh, nice to meet you, Mr. Martin." Yeah, that was how he'd introduce himself.
Brilliant. And so it sounds like it all came together pretty quickly then.
8 weeks after I asked Earl that question, and during the next week, Doc Watson, 8 weeks after that, we started recording. And 5 days later, we were done.
Wow.
And it was 6 days. We did 36 cuts in 6 days. And the book that I put out, 50 years making the landmark album, 50 years anniversary, it describes the whole thing. My brother took the photographs. He was a manager and the producer of the band and photographer. He took early Dirt Band shots and all the session shots. Well, I took one. And anyway, there's a story with each photograph. And I've been so happy because people have emailed me and I've seen it posted. "I feel like I'm at the sessions. I feel like I'm there." This really, because you can read the book and see the picture, and now you can hear what is going on there, and you kind of go, if you're playing the record, you are there. You can close your eyes. No, you got to read. It's really a neat thing.
And that's one of the really cool things about the record itself is hearing the record being made as you listen to the record. There's all the studio chat and you hear the little beautiful moments like Doc meeting Merle Travis, and having a chat. It's all just captured because the mics are still on and people are still taping stuff. And it feels like a record and a documentary at the same time.
Well, my brother he got in the music business so he could get in the film business. Because he couldn't just walk into the film business. He'd been to film school for a couple of years, and music was close. And I was in a band. "Bill, would you manage my band?" "Oh, okay." And so he became the manager, and he later produced 5 or 6 Steve Martin movies. He managed Steve Martin, the comedian, also. Steve and I went to high school together and worked in Disneyland as teenagers in the magic shop, selling magic tricks. It was really fun. And fast forward 50 years, I produced Steve's album, The Crow.
It's a great album.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I produced that. And we won a Grammy. Oh, boy. I'm glad you have it.
Yeah. Did you have any sense when you were recording the record that it was going to become Like, was it just, oh, we're going into the studio, we're making another record with our heroes because that's what we want to do? Or did you have a sense that it was going to be what it became?
The Circle album was important to me when we got the lineup. When I found out who Vassar Clements was, because I didn't know. They didn't have album credits. I asked Earl if he found fiddlers that could handle all the different styles. He goes, I found one man. I said, what's his name? Vassar Clements. Well, can he handle it all, Earl? And he just said, he'll do. Actually, he said it more like, he'll do. It was like so confident that you just, yes, sir. And Earl got the bass player. He was playing at the Grand Ole Opry. He played on everybody's records a lot, and Junior was perfect. And with all those people coming through the studio, by day 3, it was like, this is really more music, more songs. It went from being a double album to being a triple album. My brother's idea was to have a tape recorder running all the time at 3 3/4 inches per second, slower. The master tape was running at 30 inches per second. And the talking tape was running 3 3/4 inches per second. And that's what caught. Well, that's what I had to change the reels on that. But that was okay. It was a very special thing. We wanted to get Doc Watson and Merle Travis meeting for the first time, So we set it up to have Merle come by when Doc was recording on day 3. And Merle came by and starts talking. I had to interrupt. Excuse me, I got to get my brother saying, move the mic, in the control room, And I put the mic in front of Merle and let them talk. And then Maybelle talking. Maybelle was so sweet. Well, we'll do Circle in whatever key suits everybody. Look, you're Maybelle Carter. We'll do it in the key that suits you. Yeah. I'd like to do Wildwood Flower in the key of F if you all don't mind. Well, no, we don't mind, Maybelle. But that's just the way she was. And Jimmy Martin. I start off that first song. The sequencing was very important on this album. My brother did all the side producing. He sequenced it. It took 3 months. It was days of razor blades,
Yeah.
Editing and putting in all those little snippets of the talk and moving them around. You couldn't just do a Photoshop or Pro Tools stuff. You had to cut a piece of tape and go, okay, this is the one copy of them talking goes here. And then it was just really, so the first song, I messed up the beginning and Jimmy Martin goes, Earl never did do that. It was, you got all those licks in your head, don't you? Ain't you? And anyway, it was really a great way to start an album with a mistake.
Was it intimidating for you having all those people in the room?
Jimmy Martin, I felt intimidated. He'd had some of the best banjo players that ever picked. J.D. Crowe, who I hadn't met yet, and Alan Mundy and some other people. And, well, Alan hadn't played with him yet. But just monster players. These guys, J.D. passed away last year. But Jimmy was great. And after finding out that on day 2, we found out that they are all big fans of each other. Maybelle, oh, Roy, I'm so glad we're in the studio together. Well, Maybelle, it's about time we made a recording together, and Doc Watson, I've always wanted to meet you, Merle, Travis, and it was wanted to record with you. and he wanted to record with him. And so it was like we brought a bunch of friends together so they could talk. How did they talk? They used music. And we joined the conversation sometimes. It was really, it got less intimidating. As by song number 6, I think, or 7, it was like, okay, we're the band. Let's go. Let's finish. Let's do so-and-so, you know?
And it sort of feels like, you know, talking from this point in time, 50 years on now, you see so many collaborations between artists of different generations, and it's a commonplace thing for people to play with their heroes. But it feels like that was a pretty new thing at the time, a sort of multi-generational thing like that.
Well, yeah, it hadn't been done multi-generational. It was three generations. It was Randy Scruggs was 17. I was 24, 25, and the guys were younger. They've always been younger than me. But Earl was. I'm now 30 years older than Earl was when he did the records.
Wow.
But anyway, Earl was the next generation, and then actually a generation above him was Roy Acuff and Maybelle Carter, kind of. Acuff, I think, was really old. He was like 64. I remember 64. Oh, I think.
Yeah, and it's an amazing thing. And did it feel like, obviously there was like a generational gap there as well. Did it feel like there was any sort of cultural gap, or did it just feel like the music tied everything together really instantly?
I think everybody was so concerned about the music, they didn't worry about politics. No, that wasn't it. They just didn't worry about politics. I mean, the country was outside the studio. The Vietnam War was raging, and it was getting worse. And it was 1971, and churches had been burned, and kids and people being killed, and the Robert Kennedy was freshly dead, and you know, all kinds of things were going on to make America really divided, kind of like it is now in some ways, but differently. And it was like a breath of fresh air. That none of that existed. Roy Acuff was a Republican. You know, he was a real staunch Republican. He ran for governor once, but didn't hear a peep out of him in regards to anything but music. Same with Doc Watson. And Earl, who'd been to Washington, D.C. and on one of the demonstrations, was it in 69 or 70, he was at one of the peace rallies. And that got him some flack from some of the Opry people, but they let it go. I mean, it blew over. And nothing came up but the tunes. And that was great.
And it's really cool to hear that, what you're just saying about all those players coming together. And like you're listening back across history, I presume they all knew each other and they'd all cross paths at some point. But the idea that like they enjoyed the sessions as much as you guys did because they were getting to make music together, and that's a lovely thing to hear.
Well, some of them knew each other. Like Earl knew Junior Huskey, but he never really played with him. Junior was at the Opry all the time, so he'd see him there. Maybelle was at the Opry, and Acuff, and Bashful Brother Oswald, but Oswald never played with the other people. You know, he might have played with them, he didn't record with them, and they kind of knew each other. They were in the same business, you know. Doc and Merle hadn't met, but that was a wonderful thing. We got to hang out.
We'll be right back with you just after this. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins. If you're attending the NAMM show in January, stop by the Collings booth to say hello to the team, get hands-on with their selection of customised acoustics and electrics, and check out some exciting new prototypes they're working on for 2024. They'll also have a few of their world-class artists on hand demoing various instruments. And if you can't attend, don't forget to follow their Instagram and Facebook accounts throughout the show for photos, videos, and the latest news. Collings guitars are hand-built from the Sound Up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If one of your 2024 resolutions is to improve as a musician, Peghead Nation is the place to go. They have 65 streaming video courses for guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, dobro, bass and ukulele from some of the leading names in acoustic music. Courses cover bluegrass, old-time, Irish music and swing, plus lessons dedicated to improvisation, theory and ear training. Your first course is just $20 a month, and you can add more for $10. Try any course free for a month with the promo code JAMALONG. Make 2024 a year of more music at pegheadnation.com. Yeah, and it's sort of mind-boggling thinking about that only being 5 or 6 days when you think about the wealth of music that's on there and how it's endured and what a sort of cornerstone of American acoustic music that record is. The idea that it was, less than a week in the making.
Yeah, I've been reliving that week for 50 years. That's why I had to write the book. And it's every photo, 148 of them, in the book has a story behind them. And I'm really glad of that because it takes people there. It makes them realize if you don't have the album and you get it and read this book, you'll go, wow, that was cool. It's not like anything else, I don't think. And to people in America, the Circle album is kind of like, have you heard of the book Chicken Soup for the Soul?
Yeah.
It's like a musical version of Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's like when I first heard the Circle album, I was in Vietnam and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, when I first heard the Circle album, my father kicked me out of the house. When I came back and I was playing this record in my bedroom and he stuck his head in and said, "What are you listening to?" And I told him and he goes, "That's my music." And my father, we started talking then. He listened to the whole record. It brought people together, and it just did that over. I've heard that story at least 5 times from 5 different people. The one about the father sticking his head in the bedroom and the kids listening to the record. People still listen to that. After 50 years, I listen to it sometimes. It's like watching an old TV show that you haven't seen for a while. And I remember that part. I don't know what it is, but it's very strange to go back in time and back in that safe space of Will the Circle Be Unbroken.
And what are your memories of Doc at those sessions?
When we were recording Tennessee Stud, that was one that my brother really wanted to get with Doc because he just has a perfect voice. And I'm sitting with my headphones on, plunking on the banjo, along about 1825. And about the end of the first verse, I went, I'm playing on an old record. This is 1938. This is 1935. This guy is real. Doc Watson was real. He was really what so many people have emulated. And even me, I play Doc's guitar, I finger pick, and guitar, but he really played it. But his Tennessee Stud, that really captured a moment. That was done, one take, and he did it perfect. I think everybody else performed right too, but it sounds so captivating. I'm sitting there with the headphones on, listening. I'm playing on this record. I better pay attention. You know, it was really wonderful. Way downtown, frailing the banjo, you know, and that was easy as pie because Doc was driving it. He had a rhythm. He had a spirit. He was like Levon Helm was with the drums. Levon Helm of the band.
Yeah.
And when Levon was playing in the group, sitting in with somebody or whatever, everybody was happy because he had a way of playing. He called me to play the 70th birthday party in Woodstock, and I took my wife, and she wasn't a band fan. She didn't really pay attention. And the only place to stand after I did my set and watch him was like 3 feet away from his drums, you know, like really close.
Right.
By the third song, I said, honey, we can move to the back of the room, I think. She goes, no, this is fine. This guy's great. You know, because he was quiet and he was like singing so good. And that's what Doc was like. Doc was just really his spirit of what he was doing came through his notes, his precise chugga chugga chugga, and man, and his voice. It was one of the best feelings in the world. I sat in with Doc a couple dozen times over the years, and pick that banjo, John. You know, it was like when I take my solo to see him go, ha ha, you know, at the end. Yeah, that's it. You know, the approval that would give you, the feeling that I want to be in this club. Oh, I'm in it. I joined for a brief moment. I rarely got that feeling with the group I was in, but I did sometimes. It was a different thing. But playing with Doc was wonderful. I got to give him a gold record on stage one time. That was fun. Yeah, he says, yeah, I've had to play that Tennessee Stud almost every show thanks to that album. And he was not exactly thrilled about that, but you know, he liked doing other songs, but he had a hit.
Yeah, and I sort of get the sense that from the things I've read that Doc was like really happy with the way the album came out, and it, you know, no doubt brought him to a whole new audience of people as well.
When I went to see him at that club in Boulder, Merle said, yeah, this folk music thing is dying out. Because Doc had, a few years before, was playing the pretty big crowds because he was on Hootenanny show, he was on records, the folk thing was happening, but the folk scare was over. And it was kind of dying out. And I had people, I was doing a song where I would flat pick. We were doing Way Downtown. And people, wow, I never heard anybody play acoustic guitar like that. Well, you know, you've heard of Doc Watson, haven't you? No, who's that? Had so many people asking about who is Doc Watson. I wanted to get him out to more people. And the Dirt Band was playing colleges everywhere. And, well, that just seemed like a natural marriage. Same thing with Earl Scruggs. Where'd you learn to play the banjo like that? You ever heard of Earl Scruggs? No? You know, in 1970, 71, 69, like that. So getting Doc in front of a bunch of new people was wonderful.
And you get the feeling that, you know, this 100th anniversary of his birthday will do that in some form again as well, particularly with people like Billy Strings, you know, out there shouting about Doc Watson and bringing a whole bunch of new people in. That Doc's 100th birthday is an opportunity for a whole new generation to hear Doc Watson and be amazed.
Yeah, I think Billy Strings is going to do a lot of good for the acoustic guitar. He is fantastic, isn't he?
Absolutely.
He's playing a hall here in Nashville, He's playing the Bridgestone Arena. 18,000 people. Sold out 3 shows. A guy with an acoustic guitar.
Yeah. I mean, they toured here last year, and they're not, bluegrass is less of a thing in the UK than it obviously is in the States. And I got to see him in a record store in front of 350 people, and that's never going to happen again.
Well, it is the first thing I heard when I started playing the banjo. Bluegrass is going to be big this year. They said that for a few years, and it didn't change at all. Dueling banjos came on the radio in the 60s. Bluegrass is going to be big this year. Every radio station was playing dueling banjos. Nothing happened. Then Bonnie and Clyde came out with Foggy Mountain Breakdown. Bluegrass is going to be big this year. Nothing. And, it was just then Misty, Ray Stevens song, Misty, with banjo on it. And Counting Flowers on the Wall with banjo on it. Bluegrass is going to, it's like, but finally, the Circle album seemed to open some doors. It started getting play, and other people that were ready and waiting had more of an audience, and it kind of went up very slow to where years go by and it's still going up. Alison Krauss comes along, and anyway, it's going to be big this year.
And it's just great sort of thinking back, talking about an album that was, recorded 50 years ago, that people are still coming to now, and people will still be coming to for years and finding it for themselves. And like that'll be the key that unlocks this whole world to them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's part of what I do. And I've made a bunch of my solo albums that I think are excellent. One of them, called String Wizards, is my answer to the Circle album. It's an instrumental album, and I made it with Sam Bush, Jerry Douglas, Stuart Duncan, David Greer, Roy Husky, and me, and some of my best banjo playing. It's really an interesting album. Oh, and Earl Scruggs plays on a couple songs too. And we did one of his tunes where I frailed the banjo and he picked it,
Yeah.
And the bass player that played on Soldier's Joy, Junior Husky, his son played on Carolina Traveler on String Wizards. So we had the same bass. I played the same banjo I played on Soldier's Joy on the Circle album, Uncle Dave Macon's old banjo, and Earl picked whatever he had. And that's one of my favorite recordings, Carolina Traveler. 3 instruments. And 2 of them are banjos. I've really been proud that Alison Krauss, you know that name?
Yeah.
Or Alison Brown, you know that name?
Yeah.
That they both told me that Soldier's Joy was a big influence on them. Several people have told me Soldier's Joy was the door opening thing for them. So Carolina Traveler was good. I played, you know what the IBMA is, I guess.
Yeah.
I played with Earl one night, opening one of the segments of the IBMA show, and we rehearsed Carolina Traveler 15 times with Tom Gray from. I called up Tom. Tom, have you ever played with Earl? You haven't? You want to? Okay, good. Anybody would want to play with Earl, but I needed a bass player, and I wanted to play with Tom Gray, and we must have rehearsed it 15 times. We go out in front of the audience. He starts off. He plays Home Sweet Home instead. At the end, he goes, that was the wrong tune. Yes, I know, Earl. It's okay. We know that one too. His wife was sitting in the audience, and somebody sitting with her said, Louise turned to me on the 4th note and said, "That's the wrong tune." But was okay. Got to play as long as I hadn't played with them.
Cool. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, don't forget to go back and check out the 2 episodes that I did on Doc. I will put links in the show notes. And there's also going to be links in the show notes to John's site and his social media and various other bits we talked about there. So do go and check those out as well. I'll be back next week with another Bluegrass briefing and another episode for you. In the meantime, have a great week and happy picking. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.